Hello and welcome to an all-new episode of Anime Brain Freeze. We are your massively multiplayer online radio hosts.
I am John.
And I'm CC, and when there's just too much cool anime to watch, we got you covered. Today on our show we will cover a wide variety of battlefields. First, John will introduce us to a city of killers with his review of Hakata Tonkotsu Ramens. Then I will talk about the silly MMO adventures of a bargain bin Skeletor, who nonetheless develops a thirst for world domination, rivaling that of his famous cousin, in the first two seasons of Overlord. And last but not least, we will discuss the story of soldier turned scribe, Violet Evergarden, and if there is more to that series than its stunning visuals. Strap in, folks, we'll be right back.
Alright, so first up on the docket is, like you were just saying, Hakata Tonkotsu Ramens, because, you know, who doesn't want to live in a city completely filled to the brim with hitmen? It sounds like the ideal place.
Yes, totally. I'm so in. I'd be dead in like 2 seconds.
Yeah, I mean...
Not because I'd done anything or like someone, you know, had a contract put on my head or something, but just, you know, due to circumstance, getting in the way of something.
You say the wrong thing to the wrong person, it'll make you disappear, see?
Yeah, indeed.
Maybe that's the wrong era, but it works. So, although the city of Fukuoka might look relatively peaceful at first glance, it actually houses a thriving mixture of dangerous individuals such as killers, detectives, and professional revenge seekers right beneath its surface. Among their number is Zenji Banba, a laid-back and observant detective who is investigating the work of other hitmen companies in the area. However, Banba might not be the only one with a bone to pick with these organizations, as Shanmin Lin, a cross-dressing male hitman in the employ of one such company, begins to get fed up with his lack of jobs and pay. One day after Lin's current target commits suicide before he could reach him, the company refuses to pay him even half the amount they were originally supposed to for the assassination. Frustrated, Ling requests another mission and is offered the job of taking out Banba, whom his organization believes has been interfering with their business. However, when Banba arrives at his home and finds Ling inside, there's surprisingly no conflict or attempt on his life. Instead, Ling offers Banba a different option, to join him and form a team. With the offer on the table, exactly how will Banba respond, and just what plans does Ling have in store for the underground world of Fukuoka? I don't know if this is a show that really has that sort of level of intrigue, but it sounds pretty cool on the surface.
Yeah, it does. It's like, okay, I mean, Banba is a detective, so why would he, you know, aside from protecting his life, why would he side with a hitman?
Well, I mean, not to go too deep into spoilers, but we find out relatively earlier on that Banba is kind of leading a double life as well.
Oh, interesting.
That's the sort of that is the sort of city that Fukuoka is, apparently.
At least in this show, I hope. Only in this show.
A little bit of a history lesson before I move on. This show gets its name, obviously, from tonkotsu ramen, which is a type, you know, ramen is kind of like broth, which, you know, you have noodles and meats or fish with and whatnot. Tonkotsu being a cut of meat. In Fukuoka, tonkotsu ramen is known as Hakata ramen.
Mm-hmm.
So, there you go. There's your etymology lesson, I guess, on the name of the show. It also sounds like the name of a baseball team, which, hey, guess what? There's plenty of baseball played throughout this show, so there you go.
Okay, that's a weird combination. So, I mean, is it heavily featured? Is it part of the story, or, you know, do baseball players just pop up here and there?
Well, when you're not off being a contract killer, what do you feel like doing? Playing baseball.
Oh, okay. It feels like that picture from Dragon Ball Super where Yamcha lies in a fucking hole in the ground belongs in that show too, then.
Yeah, a little bit, maybe, perhaps. I guess the idea with the whole baseball angle was, there's this show's cast is sizable. I'll go into why that sort of works into its detriment briefly later on, but I guess the idea is, hey, we're all on the same side. Why not we all just play baseball together so we can be buddies? Yeah.
Hmm. I have
And,
my doubts that works out perfectly.
it works better than you might think.
Holy shit. All right.
This show, I don't think it's going to be very well remembered because it's not a super standout show, but it's fun for what it is. Mostly because the key central characters that we focus on, like Banba and Lean, and a choice selection of the other hitmen and organized crime members that they run into, they all have fun interactions. Like, and we have your sort of token characters in there, like your detectives, your hitmen, your super hackers.
Of course.
And,
Your Kiritos.
No.
Believable super hackers?
More believable than Kirito.
All right. That's at least something.
You had to bring that up.
Of course.
I wish I could forget how stupid it is. I'm going to hack the game from the inside. Have you ever done any programming before? Nope! I mean, the show, as opposed to having an overarching plot throughout, has a few smaller arcs, which is interesting because it's a short show. It's only like 12, 13 episodes. Because I remember seeing something that this show was supposed to run a lot longer, and I was expecting we would talk about it next season. But I don't know if it got cut short because, maybe they wanted to do a split season. Like, other shows have done that. Like, the second half of the third season of Food Wars is running right now, for example. And, that obviously that's not an exclusive thing. That's happened tons of times before. So I don't know if that means we're going to be diving back into Fukuoka's criminal underworld in a later season or not.
Have they announced something yet, or?
No.
Okay.
It just seems weird that they chose this style of story, but I feel like it works. I guess I feel like it makes it more digestible that, you have these smaller stories that get a lot more focus as opposed to, having a larger story with interruptions throughout, which, that other shows can manifest that pretty easily. And, it's not impossible to do, but I still feel like that this does it in a more interesting and better way. I feel really odd seeing the praises at any level for a show that's based off of a light novel because God damn it, it's about time we got a light novel that wasn't an isekai. Oh my god.
Well, just you wait for the next review, though.
Yeah,
about. But anyway, let's do the not isekai light novel first.
Let's talk about how it was headed up by Satellite, and we've talked about Satellite before.
Oh yeah,
at length with Macross Delta and Symphogear and other shows, lots of other shows. I don't know if they had as much budget for this show as some of their other big shows.
It seems a lot smaller than some of the stuff they have done in recent years. Like, just like, the small side project maybe. I don't know how popular the light novel is, so I can't say if there was any huge expectation or anticipation for this one. But this just in terms of how it's, how the setup is and how you said how it's structured, it feels like this is more, this was supposed to be more of a small project and thus probably not as big of a budget there than on Macross, for example, which is, a giant-ass franchise. And Symphogear, became one over the years too.
I mean, I imagine the light novel has some level of popularity because the author, Chiaki Kisaki, she also authored a crossover with Durarara. So.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is That is a big name, though.
Which I don't know. Or I should say, I haven't watched or know a whole lot about but it seems like a pretty good fit.
I've only watched the precursor series to that, kind of spiritual precursor, Bakano, and not all of that either. But I like what I saw. But yeah, whatever.
Yeah, I started to watch Bakano. I never got through it, and I've been chastised by people for not finishing it.
Yeah.
But I mean, I hear it's good. The one thing that sticks in my mind is that snappy ass intro sequence with the jazzy music, and it's super good.
And I think Durara does the same thing basically for its intro as well.
Yeah, that I don't know for certain. I think didn't Durara get like 2 or 3 seasons too? So
at least 2. I don't know
about
the third. But I heard it's more of a mixed bag than Bakano in terms of quality and story structure and everything. But maybe one day. But yeah, anyway, back to Ramens.
I mentioned earlier that the characters are all real fun and they have some great interactions. It's really well written, and I'll get to why I believe it's well written in a moment. But some of the side characters, in particular, early on we get introduced to this guy Saito, and he's a newbie hitman. He's just got hired by this company whose name is basically Murder Incorporated. Real subtle. But he gets sidelined pretty hard for them setting him up, to be more important than he would appear pretty early on. Like he makes a couple of appearances later on, mostly as comic relief. And it's like, haha, look at, the stupid shit that Saito's gotten himself into. Because the big thing that happens to him very early is there's a case of mistaken identity, and he almost gets taken out by a rival hitman. I guess every day is just a case of bad luck for Saito, we're led to believe. This show is filled with a lot of pretty boys, pretty men, which depending on I don't have a problem with that. That's whatever. Now, and I know you don't either because you watch and you love stuff like Free.
Yeah, exactly. I don't care as long as the story is good or the animation is good or just.
Exactly.
I'm not that superficial.
Exactly, which it doesn't bother me either. But I feel like for some people that might be a bit, oh, I don't know about that sort of shit.
Yeah.
But I feel like people really need to.
No, I mean, to be fair, if that is the only thing that the show has if that would be the only thing the show has going for it. Like, if the only thing is, okay, this is for the Fujoshi crowd, this is just here to display man meat in the most scandalous ways or something, or most endearing ways, and there's nothing else of substance to it or entertainment, then, I wouldn't be interested either. But because, that's not why I look to these shows. I'm not the target audience for that. But if there's something else, like in Free, the sports angle and the great character development for some of the characters, for example, right? In Yuri on Ice, the same thing. Although I was kind of not lukewarm at that show, but a bit ambivalent. But if as long as there's something else to it than blatant fan service, and of course that counts for the your standard Moe shows as well.
Right.
As long as there is some, equal gender opportunity here. As long as there's something else than the fan service in the show that, can keep me hooked. I can stay interested. Or right. I'm interested to begin with.
Yeah, you're right. When I'm talking like that sort of thing, I should mention how it cuts the other way too, because there are shows. Oh, look how these cute girls, and it ends up being nothing of substance, which is a trap I've fallen into way too many times.
Well, it happens,
I'm trying.
But hey, you had some winners too. We talked about one in our previous episode.
That's true, and there are so many exceptions to these rules like that.
Yeah.
Like
which only means, people, our listeners, this is a very important message. If a show looks like something specific on the outside, don't like write it off immediately. Read a summary, maybe watch the first episode, even if you think, oh, this is just more blah nonsense, or this is just Fujoshi bait. Not necessarily. Like, I mean, this is also one of the reasons I wanted to do this kind of show, to maybe, get people to look at shows they saw a picture of and thought that this looks like garbage. This looks like, just like we said, just like dumb fan service and nothing else. And then maybe find out, hey, there's more to this show, and this, what I'm hearing about it, sounds interesting, and I didn't expect that show to be this kind of show. So always open your mind, open your heart to some shows that might surprise you and might actually be up your alley, even though they don't appear to be at first glance.
Yeah, definitely. Because I mean, for all of the dodgy animation moments in Lordy Lord, I'm watching a show right now that has its moments. The writing, and you know what? And I feel like this is another comparison we're going to be going back to a lot, is with 91 Days, where it was very rough, but it had really good writing.
Yes,
and I feel like, even if a show looks bad, if like offensively bad, like, I mean, there are some shows that, you have to draw the line. I feel like maybe I should have drawn the line with that certain show. Oh God! Well, there was nothing redeeming about that on any front.
I still watched it though, but I'm a masochist, so there you go. All for the sake of this show, all for entertainment, people. Anyway, but yeah, you're right. I mean,
writing is important. It's tantamount to books, to movies, to TV, to this, to everything.
Yeah.
Which is why, it sort of caught my eye when I saw that this show was scripted by Shogo Yasukawa, who has done stuff like JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, among other things. He worked on another show, Chivalry of a Failed Knight, which I started to watch once upon a time, but it was airing at the same time as Asterisk War, which was like, oh, look at all these magical high school shows that are airing at the same time. And I just sort of shelved a whole lot of them all at once. But Asterisk War was really bland and boring. Chivalry of a Failed Knight had, the characters felt like, people, the way they interacted and they talked, and it was like, oh, they don't feel like pieces of cardboard. You know what? Maybe someday I'll come back to this, and I'd still like to revisit it. And he's actually going back to Food Wars again. He's also worked on that show as well. So, he's got good work under his belt. Maybe not so good is he's got under his belt one of your favorites, Terraformars.
Well, to be fair, I have not watched much of Terraformars, like one episode or two. So
I think I remember you having words to say about it at one point.
Yeah, well, that was more due to certain aspects of the show that are imminent, that are immediately questionable.
Yeah.
The design of the aliens and everything, and just looking like another Gans, which I also didn't like, but that's what it reminded me of heavily. So,
I think a more prolific internet figure we can look to, who also had words, but it was Wooly from Two Best Friends. He was not very enthralled with the show.
I can relate.
Yeah,
but I think Wooly also had some bad things to say about Hunter x Hunter, which I cannot sign off on, and this is ridiculous.
That I don't know for certain, because I don't remember hearing him speak at length about it. But
I think I heard
we all have opinions.
yeah, I guess he's still wrong though. Hunter x Hunter is great. It's a great show. One of the best shonen out there. Anyway, back to Ramens.
Talk a little bit more about the staff. It was directed by Kenji Yasuda, who has worked on a lot of other satellite stuff, including but not limited to Macross Delta, Shugo Kara, Fairy Tail. Symphogear, I believe World End. You talked about that show a while back. The light one saying the light novel with the long name is dumb to say, but it was one of those. Um, the music. The music is done by Kotaro Nakagawa, who we have pointed out before is working on stuff like Active Raid, Code Geass, Yu-Gi-Oh! Arc 5. So this show's soundtrack is pretty goddamn good.
Mm-hmm.
Which, it definitely... It was another thing that helped elevate this show. Probably, honestly, more than it should have been. I don't know if my takeaway from the show is that it was... If it was mediocre, because I feel like it did slightly better than that. I think the show will probably fade from the collective consciousness, though, because, it is another light novel. And, I mean, fancy the fact that all three of the shows we're going to talk about today are light novels, but,
Well, yeah, there is no escape. It's one of the main sources of anime adaptations. I mean, you can't just ignore that. That's how it is.
Yeah. In a sea, in the vast ocean of light novels that exist, it's easy to write it off when some of them are a lot more nonsensical and dumb and just otherwise forgettable. Like when I was looking at upcoming shows the other day, I saw one that was like, I got reincarnated in the dungeon as a vending machine, and I was like, okay, all right.
I mean, that sounds at least different enough. I don't know if there's any merit to that, but yeah.
I mean, it's also my favorite subgenre, another isekai. But no. I feel like there was a lot to like about this show, and I went into it, just sort of more curious than anything else. And I feel like if you're looking for a fun sort of gangster vibe that, sort of touches on different aspects of the underworld, it's a good time. It has, fun characters, good writing, great music. The animation is up and down, but it's still, I feel like, on the whole, an enjoyable experience.
Cool. Yeah, I lost track of it. I quit after episode 1, not necessarily because the show looked super bad or anything, but I recently had watched Gangsta, and I felt like, maybe this is going in a kind of a same-ish direction. I don't know if I need another show of that ilk right now. It sounded like it went a bit of a different route, maybe not as serious.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like this show had equal parts drama and humor which helped balance itself out a lot too.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I should have given it a chance, but like you said, if this is like, okay, this is another light novel adaptation and maybe a different setup than all your isekai stuff, but also a kind of small show and maybe not getting a sequel, not really an overarching story, which is kind of my forte or the things I go to or I search for. So that might not really be up my alley, but it sounds like if one is in the mood for it, a small fun like you said, gangster show, maybe they should go for it if they are not expecting a big through line or some bigger machinations or plot points in the background that get resolved later on.
Yeah, I mean, they do make it clear that each character has their motivation. Ling in particular. And he gets some closure for stuff that happens in his past, but that is probably the strongest through line in the show. Otherwise, just you're going from story to story, and I feel like there's still some merit in that. So I mean, yeah, if you're looking for like CC was saying, a little different from standard fare, from what something you like, and it's not as big of a time commitment, check it out. I think it's worth it.
Well, I promised you an Isekai show, and I'm delivering an Isekai show on this podcast.
Oh boy, here we go.
Well, yeah, we have talked about a lot of these shows. Basically, Isekai are, if you're not familiar with that term, are shows of, basically the setup is always a character being basically ripped from a normal life and thrown into some fantasy-ish world most of the time. That is maybe in a different universe, maybe in the afterlife, maybe in a game. It's, something like that. And then he has to live, he, she, mostly he, because it's mostly male power fantasy stuff. At least the shows I've watched. And then he has to, he finally can become the person he was always destined to be, with his hidden qualities. Most of these people were giant-ass nerds before, and now they can become knights or whatever. So,
unless your name is Kazuma in Konosuba.
Yeah, exactly. We'll talk about that. We have talked about a lot of these shows on our podcast, and not necessarily dishing out a lot of praise. These isekai shows often tend to succumb to, like I said, lame power fantasies with lazy plots and bad characters. Knights and Magic and a certain season of SAO come to mind immediately. Or 2 seasons maybe. But
how about just the first series of SAO?
Yeah, pretty much. But one that is held in a more high regards by you, John, you just mentioned it, is Konosuba, which is a series that constantly pokes fun at the tropes and trappings of that genre, and doesn't take itself too seriously, which is very important. I think that's also the thing you like most about the show. Besides,
definitely.
It's very well written and directed humoristic scenes. Just the comedy in that show is very, very well staged.
Yeah, I mean, Konosuba is great at what it does because it understands, the goofy outlandishness of being sent to another world and having, as you mentioned, these power fantasies. And Kazuma kind of gets tastes of it, but never the whole thing. Because that's the conceit of this show. It's just goofy, stupid BS that's constantly happening to him. And, how he can't take control of the situations around him, no matter how hard he tries.
Yeah,
whereas
he doesn't. He doesn't fail constantly. He gets to actually, complete some jobs. He finds friends or guild members and something. They build a fellowship and everything. But
if you can call it that.
Yeah, but he's always surrounded by chaos and trouble, and things don't happen the way he wants them to happen, and it is kind of the opposite to a lot of the stuff that happens in other, isekai series, where basically the main character gets the world thrown at his feet. And that is not what happens to Kazuma. But in part, Konosuba has all that in common, or at least some of that in common with the show I'm talking about today, which is Overlord. And at this point, 2-season, 26 episodes long series based on a light novel series, again, written by Kugane Maruyama, and that started in 2012 and is still running. It also got a manga adaptation that started in 2014. And the 3rd season has already been announced and will air in summer. But I already had these 26 episodes to talk about, so why not? Yeah, the series is produced by Madhouse, a name that still commands some attention. We've talked about them also in our previous episode, when you reviewed A Place Further in the Universe. And even though a lot of its original talent has left at this point, Madhouse still manages to deliver good-looking shows on a regular basis, I would say. I haven't seen any total cash in from them in recent years. At least I don't remember. So I think, what have they done? One Punch Man looked great.
They did Prince of Stride Alternative, which we've spoke about before with our slight disappointment, but
not necessarily a bad-looking show, but not well directed, maybe. They did that. I think Parasite was also by them in recent years, a show I also liked.
One of the other shows I did before, Place Further Than the Universe, with like the same director and a lot of the same team, was one called Hana Yamata, which was also a gorgeous looking series.
So yeah, there you go. And of course, they have a giant history behind them, with lots of high end production, anime productions. They made one of my favorite anime movies, which is Vampire Hunter D Bloodlust. Fantastic movie. Ninja Scroll also. They have done so much cool stuff. So they're still doing cool stuff, even though a lot of the people who are responsible for that old cool stuff have left at this point, and, for example, wandered off to found their own studios, in Studio Mappa, for example. It's by one of the big older Madhouse guys. So yeah, there you go. They did this show. Director is Naoyuki Ito. Not a lot of director gigs, straightforward director gigs from that guy. I mean, he did Digimon Data Squad, which was the 5th season, if I'm not mistaken. He also worked as an episode director on a few other things. Also, unit director. One Piece stuff, as a director on an episode of Re Cutie Honey. So, definitely some more prolific stuff in his repertoire. Straightforward director for a whole show. Not that many things. One thing that stuck out to me was he worked on the key animation for Robin Hood no Daiboken, which is an adaptation of, Robin Hood in anime form, which was one of the first anime I saw as a kid on TV, not knowing that it was anime. But anyway, that was still a cool show, and yeah. So much for that. So what is Overlord about, and what makes it different from other isekai stuff? Well, it starts out samey enough. Stop me if you've heard this before.
Okay.
Our main character is a guy with with an online nickname. In this case, it's Momonga, and he's the last remaining player of his guild in a giant virtual MMO called Yggdrasil. And that MMO is about to close its doors. The server's gonna shut down, and service will end. So yeah, death is at the door, so to speak, for Yggdrasil. So Momonga sits in the guild's assembly hall, talking to the NPC servants, drowning in melancholy and musing about the great times he had with his friends in this game. And he waits for the death timer of the server to run out. And then suddenly the game doesn't seem to shut down. After some investigating, he finds out he can't log out. He is now trapped in the body of his player character. He can't use some of the game's functions anymore, and apparently the guild's headquarters, the Great Tomb of Nazarick, has been transported to a world very close to that of the game, but still kind of different. So far on paper, this sounds like kind of a SAO ripoff in certain parts. Being trapped in the virtual world and not being able to log out and everything. But still, some things that are different in there. And one of the key differences is Momonga did not play a straightforward good guy in that game. He was Horde for life. Mm-hmm. So naturally, the character he chose is that of a giant undead lich with flowing robes, who was also the most powerful black mage in his guild. I guess, John, you can relate playing a black mage in Final Fantasy XIV.
Magic. Big DPS numbers.
But I think you played a sexy lady and not a giant undead skeleton.
Well, like the progeny of dragons sort of lady. But
okay,
more on that another time.
Maybe. So yeah, now that might be something different, a twist, but that wouldn't necessarily have been enough to keep me interested in that kind of show for longer than maybe a few episodes. But as we know, every evil demonic overlord needs a bunch of trusty servants and minions, which of course are the NPCs from the game who have now come to life. And this is where the fun really starts. Momonga's servants cover a wide variety of demon and fantasy tropes, the most important ones being the Floor Guardians, which are basically his generals. We, for example, have Cocytus, who is this giant four-armed insect creature with a giant battle axe. We have Demiurge, who is a demon with a spiffy red suit and combed back hair and glasses, and who is kind of the guy with a plan when it comes to battle strategies. We have the magic caster twins Aura and Mare. We have the vampire Sheltier Bloodfallen. There's an MMO name for you.
Wow.
And of course, the succubus Albedo, who is Momonga's right-hand woman and commands all of the 7 floor guardians. We also have the head butler of the Tomb of Nazarick, Sebastian. Yes, his first name is Sebas and his last name is Tian. Not kidding.
That's another MMO name.
Yeah. And his battle mates called the Pleiades. And that's only a few of the characters in this show. Giant ass cast. Ginormous cast, really. It's ridiculous. And it gets even more gigantic in the second season, but we'll get to that and to the problems that brings with it. Now, of course, this is a power fantasy. So all the servants adore Momonga because he is one of the 41 supreme beings, aka the guild members who created the NPCs and thus are, their gods, basically. Albedo also has a giant lady boner for Momonga because before the server shut down, he messed with her settings for funsies, and that shit stuck. So now she really wants to have his bony dick, I guess, and wants to make babies with him. She even has a fucking hug pillow with a picture of him, which naturally only is the picture of a dangly ass skeleton, and that's amazing. That is one of the best scenes in that show, and I laughed my ass off when I saw that. I would say the same parts that make Konosuba great, which are the wacky humor and trope dismantling, are also the best part about Overlord, which, I just told you about, so you know what kind of humor you can expect when the show decides to go that route. For another example would be underneath his demonic appearance, Momonga, of course, still is the goofy nerd he was when playing the game, kind of like Kazuma. So we often get him talking in a booming voice to his minions, and then mumbling with his normal human voice in his head something along the lines of, holy shit, I have no fucking idea what I'm doing here, help! And that's also always great. It's fantastic. He also has like this weird spell placed on him so that doesn't get out of hand, because when he gets really agitated, he basically has autocast regenerate or I don't know what would be the RPG counter potion to getting enraged or frenzied or something like that. The typical one that you see in a Final Fantasy game. I don't know. But basically he has that autocast on it, so every time he loses his shit, you see like this pillar of light just coming down from top, and he immediately has his cool again. So, yeah, that's amazing. So the show also doesn't neglect its game heritage in more ways than one, and plays around with that, which I also really appreciated. It's great, like I said, those are the parts I like most about the show, but in its core, this is more of a fantasy action show. So Momonga takes on the name of Ain's Old Gown, which was the name of the guild that he and his friends built, and decides to, kind of take over that new world, but more because he hopes that way he can find some of his old friends who maybe made it to this new realm with him. Because, he always reminiscence back to the old days because he had so much fun with his friends and doesn't want to, leave that time behind. And so he hopes, hey, maybe now that I'm stuck in this world, maybe some of my old friends made it here too, and we can have adventures, go together on adventures again and have fun and find treasures and all that shit. And that's kind of relatable. It's also sad. But, that's his motivation. And it's understandable. So he sends his servants on recon missions, fortifies his headquarters, and makes a name for himself, first by saving a nearby village from an attack of orcs and asshole knights, and then taking on the guise of a masked adventurer called Momon, who takes basically on RPG quests, goes to an inn, enlists in the adventure guild or something, and says, okay, what do I have to do to get platinum rank here to become the best adventurer ever? And basically gains fame and new allies through that as well. This is pretty much like the middle part of the first season where he does that. And that sticks too. Like from there on, he basically has his double identity. Sometimes walks around as Einzelgon, like this demon lich, and sometimes he walks around as Momon, and this is like this righteous adventurer guys. And when those paths cross, things get problematic. But yeah, he also he always has to walk like this tightrope of not being completely human anymore, kind of losing his humanity in certain part, but also not slipping into total evil asshole mode, which is easier said than done, especially because he always has to come up with kind of understandable good reasons why he's saving people instead of killing them, because that's the first thing all of his servants are going for. Because of course, the way they are designed, every filthy human is beneath them because they're demon lords. And so he has to rein them in, and he has to give them reasons why he's saving that village. And he's like, well, it's more helpful to have these humans work for me and, like, you know, carry my name across the borders of this country and everything. So he has to come up with some bullshit reasons, you know. And yeah, it's fun. But I wonder if that will work out for him indefinitely, or if he, you know, some of his servants, of course, also because they're now real living beings in this world, they start to change their characters a bit. They start to break out of their roles and, you know, evolve and become kind of more different beings. Not necessarily good beings or good people, not all of them, some of them definitely. But, you know, there's definitely a chance for them to become something else and maybe find interest in actually saving people and doing something else besides furthering the glory of Nazarick, which, you know, right now is their main goal. It's they're in this to serve Momonga and to bring glory bring glory back to this guild. Of course, Momonga doesn't succeed all the time, you know, with being the good guy, and to still keep him and his minions sympathetic, the show puts some villains in their way who are so fucking repulsive that you just want to see Momonga bash their face in. You know, if your main character is not necessarily a good guy, you put an even worse guy in his way, and, you know, that's the way you get the viewers on his side. So yeah, of course, like every power fantasy, when it comes to the opponents of our main characters, there is the problem of almost nobody coming even close to Momonga's power. You know, we had that thing with Kirito, we had that thing with what was his name in fucking Knights and Magic? I don't even remember him. Ernesty. Yeah, so that's a problem here too. So a lot of the fights are one-sided, at least for now. There are some teasers at the end of season 2 that promise a change in that regard, but we'll see. And there's a big confrontation in season 1 that is more evenly matched, so it's not a completely straightforward affair. Also, the important fights look really damn great, as expected from Madhouse. There's even some spare clever use of CG on some of the enemies and Momonga's armor only, so that they can use some dynamic camera perspectives and everything. So yeah, good choices were made here in that regard as well. The show also has fun with the leftover game mechanics. I mentioned that when he gets hungry or overly excited, he is calmed down by an auto spell. And also, as expected, during fights, Ainz pulls a lot of last-minute aces out of his sleeve. Now, a lot of shows do that, but they don't always justify it. But this series explains those, you know, last-minute saves in the most sensible game-related way possible.
Really?
Yeah, because that fucker is using pay-to-win items he purchased from the in-game cash shop to break the game. You know, he's a cheap-ass motherfucker. Or, well, not cheap, he paid money for that, but that's how he wins those fights. Because he just bought those fucking overpowered items. And I love that. I thought that's fantastic. Of course. I would do the same. I mean, now this is a matter of life and death. Of course I would fucking use pay-to-win tactics.
I wasn't so sure up until this point, but that's pretty good.
Yeah. They even mentioned the ridiculous amount of money he spent on gacha tickets at several times. So,
oh no.
Good stuff. That hit home. I was like, yeah, I think a lot of people fell into that trap. I think we even know some of those people. So, yeah. So anyway, I really, really appreciated that the show went there. The series is also really good at world building. in the way that the world feels like a big sprawling place with many different races in its own economy, class system, and so on. But that also brings some problems with it, and this is where we finally turn our eyes to season 2. Now, there was a big break between season 1 and season 2, the former airing in 2015 and the latter this winter. And hadn't I rewatched the first season before going into the second, I would have been completely lost. The second season adds so many new factions, characters, and locations to this world that it's hard to keep track, or at least a bit hard to keep track. On the one hand, that's cool and good for expanding the scope of the world and make it feel more alive. On the other hand, it shifts the focus away from our core set of characters, which I wasn't super happy with, because I liked that the first season had a strong focus on either Momonga or one of the servants. And in season 2, we learn about tribes of lizard people, and then, we get a battle with those. We see them and their society and how they get the troops together to fight the people of Nazarick. And then after that, the show shifts its attention to the princess of a kingdom and her knight and the crew surrounding her. And of course, the main cast is always playing a part in those other characters' stories as well. But all this made the second season feel a bit unfocused and uneven, especially considering it's only 13 episodes like the first one. And there's so much stuffed into those 13 episodes that it definitely feels like overkill at times. The first season felt a lot more streamlined, a lot more focused. And yeah, the second season is just introducing so many new characters that it really struggles to move the main plot forward at a decent pace, in my opinion. It all felt a bit fillerish. I like that, for example, Sebas got a bigger part in this second half of the second season because he's a badass motherfucker. But like I said, most of season 2 felt a bit fillery or like a build-up for something bigger coming maybe in season 3, which I can't be sure about. But like I said, there's a tease at the end with a new faction that might be, they recognize Momonga as what he is in that world. Not necessarily his true nature, where he came from, but he's a force to be reckoned with and everything. And it feels like they are not necessarily overestimating their own power set, and maybe we're gonna get a big confrontation with that new faction in season 3, and that's where the main plot is heading. It felt like season 2 was like an interlude season or something like that, where we're expanding now the scope, and in season 3 maybe we're gonna really get back to the main plot again. Another kind of downside of season 2 is there are also no fights that come even close to holding a candle to the 3 big battle scenes of season 1. In terms of, quality and staging and everything. They're cool, definitely. The first big battle in season 2 is really cool. But, nothing, like I said, as good as the first season, which is kind of a disappointment because, like I said, I really liked the fights in the first season. It's not all bad, though. I like that some of the minor characters from season 1 gained some unexpected relevance again because, in season 1 you have some characters who, especially on the human side, who feel like cannon fodder, and you think that, oh, they're only gonna appear like for one episode and for that specific reason, or to make the one character from Nazarick look particularly strong. But then suddenly they appear in season 2 again and get an actual arc and plot point and meet other characters that are important, and I'm like, oh, that's nice. I didn't expect that. There even was a surprising resolution to a minor plot point from season 1 with one of the side characters that Momon meets during his adventure time, and that I didn't expect that would get any resolution, and that made me go, oh, you actually wrapped that up, cool, that makes this character more interesting, neat. And yeah, I like that the story didn't that the series, while adding so many new characters, didn't neglect the characters it had introduced in the first season, and that was cool stuff, and I hope they do some more with that in the third season. Of course, the one that I'm kind of sad about is that they can't really go into the background of the floor guardians because they don't really have one. Because they probably have one, but that is an artificially created, even in that universe, that is an artificially created background by the other guild members, the friends of Momonga, and I don't think we will ever really learn about, learn the background stories of the Floor Guardians. So I hope we will at least get some character development out of them, like they become different characters and, very much own characters in their own right. And Sebastian has already shown signs of that, and some of the other characters as well. And that's also one of the interesting things. Momanga is trying to push them into that direction, like not blindly obeying his orders, even though they want to, because he's kind of like their god figure and everything. But questioning his orders, questioning some of his strategies and everything, and questioning their own roles in his command and everything, because he doesn't want mindless puppets anymore, because he recognizes that they're not NPCs anymore. Now they're living beings, and he wants them to, become their own characters too. So I think that's cool, and I hope they do more, even more with that in coming seasons, and develop those side characters and let them go their own paths. That would be cool. Just, to be realistic and straightforward, I would say season 2 was a bit inferior to the first season. So I hope whatever they maybe try to set up for season 3 will get a big payoff come July. But yeah, I would still recommend the show if you can deal with a lot of dumb power fantasy shit and a lot of talk about MMO game mechanics. But when Overlord hits on all cylinders, it's a fun ride that doesn't take itself too seriously. Yes, there's some edgelord shenanigans with Momonga talking about how he is slowly using his humanity and everything, but you get enough wacky things like I mentioned, the body pillow, the pay-to-win shit, and the Lord of the Forest, who turns out to be a giant hamster in this show to counter those occasional edgy beats. Oh yeah, speaking of edgy beats, I really like the first OP and ED of this series. Let both of them run their entirety on each episode because they kick ass. Really like the music. The music in the show itself is also really good. Nothing that stands out immensely, but really solid soundtrack stuff. Be warned, this show is pretty damn violent. Nothing on the level of Devilman Crybaby, of course, but there is enough blood and killing to go around. This is, just because this is more of a, I was just more of an edgy setup, but with the main character being kind of a not good guy, and of course he doesn't really take pity on people who behave like assholes, so make of that what you will. There's a lot of violence going on around in that show, but yeah, Overlord is an isekai show with a neat twist, enough good action and cool characters to keep you engaged, and even though season 2 was in some ways a step down, I still have my hopes up that season 3 will find back to its old form. So if you're down for some trashy fantasy action, check it out.
Right, and we're gonna bring on home this light novel cast with a talk about Violet Evergarden. So, the Great War finally came to an end after 4 long years of conflict. Fractured in two, the continent of Telesis slowly began to flourish once again. Caught up in the bloodshed was Violet Evergarden, a young girl raised for the sole purpose of decimating enemy lines. Hospitalized and maimed in a bloody skirmish during the war's final leg, she was left only with words from the person she held dearest, but with no understanding of their meaning. Recovering from her wounds, Violet starts a new life working at CH Postal Services after falling out with her new intended guardian family. There she witnesses by pure chance the work of an auto-memory doll, a clerk that transcribes people's thoughts and feelings into words on paper. Moved by this notion, Violet begins work as an auto-memory doll, a trade that will take her on an adventure, one that will reshape the lives of her clients and hopefully lead to self-discovery. So, did you finish watching this show? Because before we start, okay, all right. Just because when we were talking before, like several weeks back, you asked me, do you think the show is still worth watching? And I feel like having come to the end of it, that I think so.
I would agree. I mean, I have some gripes with it, but we'll get to that. Yeah, maybe we should talk about the structure a bit.
Before we go into that, I want to
Okay.
say I was really confused at first going into this
Why?
because I thought Violet, and I think I told this to you, I thought Violet was like a construct, not a human, but
Oh, okay.
and that's what kind of caught me off guard at first. And then, when they sort of begin to flesh out her story and move forward, I was like, oh, okay, I was just stupid.
Well, you easily can mistake it. Violet has a very machine-like demeanor because she is not good with emotions. She has
Mm,
not really learned how they work, how to process them, how to verbalize them, like not at all. That, is one of the biggest plot points because the person that maybe was the only one being kind to her in all of her life up to, well, when the show starts, left her with a specific instruction and specific last words that are very, emotion laden, and she can't make sense of them because she doesn't know what they mean. Just because she doesn't can't make sense of the emotions within, and yeah, that is a big part of the show. Her learning from her job about about different states of emotion, about people who have overcome a lot of emotional hurdles, all different ones, but boiling down to people coming to grips with their own emotional grievances and everything, and evolving from that, and her helping them through writing their emotions down and putting them in a letter, and helping to verbalize them and convey them to other people that are important in their life, and thus moving on from certain things, or evolving, or finding common ground with certain people and everything. Yeah, so basically that's what it comes down to. And while Violet is doing that, she also gains knowledge and empathy and everything, like things she had the barest glimpse of before she started this job.
mm.
And yeah, that's the core of the show. This is basically like what happens. And another thing where you of course can think that she is that she might have been a machine is not only her demeanor, but she lost her two arms in the war. Like she
Mm.
has robot arms, automail from Full Metal Alchemist, basically. And yeah, this is mostly what the show is about. Is Violet facing post war trauma, and having to overcome that. I mean, it's not only that she needs to understand what the Major Gilbert Bougainvillea, what he said to her, and what basically their relationship was and everything. She not only has to understand that, but she also has to come to grips with her having been a war instrument and killing a lot of people. And yeah, that is what this show is about, and that's what it's mainly talking about, and what it builds up to and everything. And yeah, what did you think about how the show went about developing Violet as a character, and how it moved her progression along through, first having her take on different jobs and slowly showing her different sides of human emotion, and then later making her the bigger part and developing her and making her change more relevant to the other characters in her life.
Like it has been, we've been implying so far is that a lot of this show is mostly learning to live again.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like we kind of touched on that. Well, more than touched on it with our talk about the ancient Magus bride. But, this is obviously for a different reason because of Violet's past is, different than
Yeah. Basically, she considering what we know about her, she hasn't really lived before.
right.
I mean, she's had a life, and that was ripped from her in a very sad and sad way, and she has to find back to that, or to a new version of that, to find happiness. And Violet has to all learn it from the ground up. Because the only thing she's known up to this point is war and violence and abuse and all of that. And
as opposed to someone like Chisei who had a taste of it and has to kind of relearn that. I feel like I sort of drew that parallel on a whim or at the spur of the moment. So I feel like, there's a bit more commonality between these shows maybe than I had previously really thought about, which is interesting.
Yeah, sure. I mean, that's just an interesting setup that has been used in different shows in different ways, and it's always cool to see a character progress from this one very far end of the spectrum to the other far end of the spectrum, and that can go wrong, especially if you lean too heavily into one aspect of certain emotions, and you
can't do it all at once because then it comes across as ham-fisted.
Yeah, and I think the show where the show does a good job is at slowly trickling those bits of understanding and revelation and evolution in Violet's empathy and her ability to understand what she's going through and everything, and to work through that. Just make it believable and trickle that out, and slowly builds towards that with and not having like this sudden burst of emotion in one episode coming out of nowhere. I feel like just by giving you a prestige of characters that go through different things in their life, and her witnessing that, and at the beginning not really understanding it, but then getting a glimpse of that, and then now I understand what that actually means and what these characters are saying and what that relates to.
Yeah, just the way she learns from the experiences of others, I think, is probably one of the strongest aspects of this story.
Yeah, definitely. I feel in certain parts the show leans a bit too heavily into the melodrama. Gets maybe a bit too schmaltzy in certain parts, but those were kind of rare, where I was like, oh god, no, this is... And some of the side stories felt, okay, these are a bit conventional, I've seen this before, and this is... You always get these moments where it's like this swell of orchestral music, and you have very pretty visuals, which in general we have to talk about in a moment. But that often happens, and if you feel like, okay, now we're getting this again, like, okay, here's the big revelation and everything, here's the big plot, but that can happen, but it never went so completely overboard that I was like turned off by it. I was like, oh man, this is too much. Yes, like I said, leans heavily into certain melodramatic aspects of the story, but it doesn't feel too forced most of the time. So yeah, I like that. I already mentioned before. Let's talk about the visuals. This show is ridiculously beautiful.
Yeah, it is.
It's nonsense. Like
this is KyoAni just like firing on every cylinder all at once, constantly.
Yeah, it's crazy that this is a TV show. Like most of that stuff looks like this could be a movie.
I wonder if it's because they made a deal with Netflix for it to be streaming. I wonder if Netflix threw in a good chunk of change for that.
Yeah, could be. I don't know if they got production credit on it or anything.
I mean, they are listed in the show's credits, so
there's. I mean, where's to start? The ridiculously beautiful backgrounds, the the effect work on the water, the city scenery, the detail in every little aspect of the characters' movements, the faces. It's ridiculous. The faces are so expressive, which is important, since Violet herself is not a very expressive person. So the smallest facial gestures need to convey their relevance, and I think the show does that very well. You get a bit of KyoAni phase, maybe, in certain parts. Where it's like, oh, okay, now we got these, like, pretty lips and everything, and, their eyes open up, and, you got focus on the face, and it's like, okay, and everyone being mesmerized the first time they lay eyes on Violet gets a bit old. I mean, I get it. She is pretty, and everyone is like,
but she's so pretty. She's like a doll.
Yeah, they play with that a lot. Like, oh my god, it's a human doll, and she is working in a profession called auto memory doll. Get it? And she's also kind of a doll because she hasn't learned how to empathize and emote yet. So get it? It's a doll that must learn to become a human. It's very on the nose.
Yeah, they hammer that home pretty hard from beginning to end.
Yeah, the show, I mean, some parts of the show are subtle, but a lot of them are not.
Yeah.
Really, especially in terms of presentation. Don't expect to search for like hidden meaning or anything. The show wears its intentions on its sleeves. And, that was just one of the things that got a bit grating at times when like the seventh dude in the show like looks at her, or even the girls, and it's like, oh, and we're like, my dude, she's not fucking Helen of Troy. Get over it. It's like, holy shit. It's just getting ridiculous. But yeah, aside from that, it's alright. It doesn't get too, I don't know, I wouldn't say too fan service. There are no lingering shots on the body of the on the bodies of the characters. I felt like I didn't.
Yeah, I mean, I think if they did that, it would really lessen a lot of the impact that the show would have had.
Of course it would, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the director or producers are aware of that. So, some shows forget that this can can be a detriment to the show and put it in regardless. And I don't know, KyoAni have done something like that in the past, not necessarily unintentional, but that doesn't necessarily make it better. But in this case, I think they don't. There is, if we want to say that, like, the overemphasis of certain beautiful, the beauty of the characters and other characters reacting to the beauty is also already some kind of fan service. And of course, I bet the machine girl that needs to learn how to, emote, and that you immediately want to protect and shower love and everything is also a fetish to some people. Of course, that can also be considered fan service, but I think the show doesn't go out of its way to make it feel like they wanna like advertise or merchandise that, and that's a good thing. Like the show is focusing on the characters and the story, and that's noticeable, and that's a good thing. And it feels like that was the focus of the director and the focus of the producers and of the people responsible for the animation and the art and everything. And you see that there is a focus here, and I think it's on the right things. Let's maybe get back to the structure of the show a bit. So we have like these I think the first 8 episodes, 8 to 7, you have Violet taking on different jobs, sometimes with some of her compatriots from the office, sometimes not, and traveling to different cities and everything, helping different people. We got to start with a princess who is about to get married and doesn't feel right about that because she isn't really ready to become an adult and everything. And we got something with a coworker who is returning to her hometown and still doesn't really like that her parents are still treating her like a kid and don't really accept what she has chosen her life to be. They still seem to want her to become part of the village and be their little girl and stay in her hometown, and she wants to be in a city, and she wants to become the best auto memory doll there is. And Violet helps those people by putting their emotions into letters and then delivering them basically to the other party, and then so that they can reach an understanding and evolve further and everything. So yeah, those are some of the story things that happen. And that basically continues on until we get to episode 9, which really felt like the end of the series to me. Because it has like this big climax moment for Violet's character arc where she where some big things happen and some important things happen for her to come to grips with her past and everything, what she did. And after that, for some reason, the show continues, which left me a bit flabbergasted, to be honest. I don't know, how do you feel about that? Were you like, what? Okay, this could have been easily the end of the show, because that's how I felt. Or did you feel like, okay, this definitely needs a few more episodes?
I mean, I agree, and I guess I see why they kept going, just because the concluding episodes basically have her kind of reconfronting the ghosts of her past in a way. So I kind of feel like that was a necessary step for, the closure of, this chapter in her life that she seems to have not been able to leave behind, but now she can. It's like reopening the old wounds, but at the same time a resolution, sort of. I feel like
it shows that she has become a different character, and how it shows how she acts on the development and the empathy she gained throughout until episode 9, and the resolution she drew from that. And I guess that was a good thing, but I didn't immediately realize that they were going for that. It just felt like this big hallmark scene in episode 9, and then they continued on in episode 10 with her doing another job. Of course, what she does during that job wouldn't have been possible if she didn't have her big, kind of arc wrap up in episode 9, and her big development.
I do feel like episode 10 was a particularly strong one, though.
Yeah, it definitely was.
Strong insofar that it got softy old John crying like a baby.
Yeah, it's a very emotional episode. But, in the beginning of episode 10, I was like, wait, why are they going back to that again? We just had major thing. I thought, okay, this felt like it should have been over. And are we going to continue with these job stories? And now she's maybe helping a bit more people? That's weird. But
to be fair, they don't dwell on that long before getting back to what I feel like was the conceit of the ending.
Yeah. 12... is it 11, 12, and 13, or only 12 and 13? I don't remember. But that...
I mean, 11 kind of touches on that again, but it's really stronger in 12 and 13, I think.
Yeah, 11 leads... What happens in episode 11 kind of leads into the big climax of episode 12 and 13, right. Which was surprisingly action-y. I mean, we had some action scenes in a flashback scene to her past with Gilbert and everything. And the battle that ensued, and that resulted into her having losing her arms and everything. But that was also very actiony. But the show ending on a big action climax, I didn't expect. But that's what that's kind of what happens. I didn't dislike it. I was just surprised that that's what they decided to do. But like you said, that's also important after she has evolved and come to terms with her past on an emotional level, and being able to talk about it and verbalize it, she now has to act on it. And that's what she does in episode 11, 12, and 13, especially in episode 13. And so I guess, at this point, I also realized, oh, okay, this is where they were going, and this is the final, this is where this show was steering to, what the show was steering towards. But it took me a bit of time to understand that, because but eventually, and I thought the show also ended on a really strong note. Basically doing what letting the character do something that is the logical endpoint to what she's been doing before, and I was really happy with the ending. How did you feel about it?
I walked away from it really satisfied as well. So I think, without going into spoilers, we probably both liked it for the same reason.
Yeah, I guess so. It's not I don't know, not necessarily a super eventful story, terms of, straightforward plot events and everything, but there's enough emotional stuff happening. Yet, in the beginning, it feels more of like slice of life. Okay, now Violet is helping that person and that person. But if you pay attention, you see that there's a slow trickle in every episode of her, of adding to her character development. And then you get the results from that and the payoff for that in the last batch of episodes. So if you think, that's why I asked you in the beginning, because I didn't pay maybe didn't pay enough attention in the first batch of episodes. I was like, okay, is this only gonna be her going around helping people? And I didn't like all of those people's stories. Some were a bit too cliche for me, and I was like, okay, if it's only this, I don't necessarily care about all of those people. Maybe I'm gonna drop out if there isn't gonna be a stronger development to Violet's character herself. But eventually I got that, so I walked away. I'm happy. I'm glad that I stuck with the show after all, and I, got over those first batch of episodes that didn't, hold my interest too much. But in the end, it was really worth it sticking with the show, in my opinion.
Definitely. I mean, out of a lot of the shows we've watched recently, I feel like it is appropriate for once for me to pull out calling this one much more character driven than a lot of the others. And I think that is definitely its strongest suit. Yeah,
definitely. We got a lot of neat characters. Some get more the spotlight than others. Her superior is an important person. I think he gets some neat development. I forgot his name though. I can't think of it right now.
Claudia.
Yeah, Claudia. Right. And we also get a kind of interesting dynamic with the fucking brother of a major, with Dieter, who is a major dick. Yeah, man.
I don't know. Maybe more on the surface than anything else, because he is a soldier type.
But that's most of what we see, except for a kind of basically right at the end, where we learn to understand what his motivation behind everything was and how he was treating her and everything. And I don't think he was fully redeemed. They were starting there. It was like, okay, I get where he's coming from and everything, but he's still kind of an asshole, in my opinion. Especially a lot of people in the show are an asshole, especially when it comes to their treatment of Violet. Basically, all the other army guys, aside from Gilbert, are Bond villains in terms of how evil they are. Everyone seems to be intent on repeating how Violet is worthless beyond her fighting capabilities, and how she's just a tool and fucking doll and everything. And I had to chuckle at some of that, because they were so fucking one-note villainous characters. And I thought Dieter was the same, because he's repeating the same line over and over again that got on my nerves, where it's like, you're just a doll, you're just a tool, blah, blah, blah. And there was this one scene, that was kind of a weirdly directed scene, where they're standing he's standing with some of the other characters on the deck of a boat, and then the camera zooms out a bit, and there's coming a seagull in focus, and I was like, man, I hope that bird shits on Dieter's head. It didn't, which made me kind of sad in that moment, but I guess maybe in the end it was for the better. Though I would have really liked to see that in that scene, because he was getting on my nerves. But yeah, even that person gets kind of an understandable motive, I guess. Like I said, doesn't make him fully redeemed, but he is not a one-note asshole character, which was kind of cool. And some of Violet's colleagues get also some development. Not a lot. It's not like there's a huge conjoined plot string that is where Violet and one of her colleagues go to things together. Only singled out episodes maybe. Mm-hmm. They are part of important emotional moments in that show. Especially there's one that comes to mind. It's from episode 11. It is also a very emotional episode in itself, but also an emotional high point in regards to Violet's character and everything at the very end there. So yeah, they are important. They are important part of the show. Don't expect them, to get too much development, except for the the single episodes that they are heavily featured in. But yeah, the focus is on Violet, and that's how it should be. I mean, her name is in the fucking title of the show. So, I mean, it's good that they focused on her, and I'm really glad that they, brought her story to a logical conclusion, actually did something with that. Small little tidbit for people who don't speak German out there, just something I noticed. I don't know what was the city's name and what was the country's name, but they're called Leiden and Leidenschaftlich. And I thought that was pretty, again, very on the nose, but also related pretty well to Violet's arc, or was a pretty on the nose reflection of that, because Leiden in German means, sorrow or suffering, and Leidenschaftlich means passionate. Uh-huh. So, those are two aspects of learning how to emote and how to feel, because either you have emotions or you don't, and if you have emotions, you can't always have good. You can only have good emotions. So those two things are part of the same coin. If you learn how to be passionate and empathize with people, you will inadvertently learn how to suffer, because you're gonna lose someone and you're gonna feel the full brunt power of that emotion and everything. So I thought that was really interesting that they put that into the fucking city and country name. I don't know if that was intentional actually, or if they just thought, oh, those are cool German words, I guess.
I get the feeling there was some thought behind that. There has to have been.
Yeah, it feels like it matches. It matches parts of the show, concept of the show. It's too much. I thought that was just a neat thing that popped up at me. Do you have anything else to say about Violet Evergarden?
I mean, I think we touched on most of everything, but it's definitely a very beautiful show with a very poignant story that I really enjoyed.
I can't count just from a visual standpoint alone. I can't count all the moments I looked at the fucking screen and I was like, how did they do that? Fucking Jesus Christ. The budget. Holy shit. Yeah.
KyoAni got that Netflix money.
Yeah, but it's not just the visual. It's like the whole presentation, the sound, the music, sweeping orchestra soundtrack. It's great stuff. It's worth watching alone from a presentation standpoint. But then you also get this really neat character story of a really, really damaged, really broken person that learns to live again, and that had some really emotional high points. Sometimes drenched too much in melodrama and everything. But I think if you're not too, allergic to that, I would say you should really try watching this show and until the very end. Don't get discouraged by maybe the first batch of episodes like I was, because there is a really good payoff at the end, and I think the show brings the character arc to a good conclusion, and it's only 13 episodes, so it's not a long watch. So definitely time well spent if you're on the search for good anime material. So yeah, check it out. It's a great show. And that is a wrap on the 52nd episode of Anime Brain Freeze. All the music in our show is from the Double Dragon Neon soundtrack by the amazing Jack Kaufman. Please go to vit.bandcamp.com and check out his awesome work. Our show is available on most of the popular podcast services, but it's always worth visiting animebrainfreeze.com for some interesting articles linked in our episode release posts. Follow us on Twitter at AnimeBrainFreeze. We tweet regular updates and fun anime-related stuff there. Leave us comments and questions on Facebook and our YouTube channel, or send an email to animebrainfreeze@gmail.com. We would love to read your feedback. Thanks for tuning in. We hope you had a good time, and please join us again on our next show. Macht's gut!
So long, everybody. On the next episode of Anime Brain Freeze,
we return to the roots of shonen action
and celebrate the return of the king.